Hello, everybody. Today we have Bhavna Gupta with us. She's also known as Story Auntie on a YouTube channel. She is basically a storyteller at heart, touching lives with the vibrant tales. And she has also been my school teacher back in the mid 1990s and up to the late 1990s, teaching me and other students English. She curates stories that spark curiosity and nurture young souls, making learning a joyous journey. So I would like to thank Madam for making the time for to come and speak with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ajay, for inviting me for this talk. And I think this is a double bonus for me because I also get to connect with one of my ex-students. It's a double pleasure for me. So thank you very much for giving me this opportunity, for inviting me, and it's nice to get in touch with you again.
Same, Madam. Same, absolutely. Thank you. So, Madam, please tell me, where are you from?
So I'm from Mumbai, based in Mumbai, always a Mumbaikar, born here, studied here, taught here. But once I started working, I moved throughout India, but I'm still based in Mumbai. I worked pan-India, almost pan-India, but I stay in Mumbai.
Okay. So, what's the story behind Story Auntie? How do you connect with children's hearts through the tales you tell?
Sorry?
What's the story behind Story Auntie? Call yourself Story Auntie, isn't it? So, how do you
That's a good
connect with
question.
children's hearts to the tales you tell?
Well, so Story Auntie was actually born post-COVID because before COVID, as Ajay told you, that I was working as a teacher, then I had kids and I was on a long sabbatical. Once I got back to work, I also started teacher training. So I got into teacher training. I started working with Times of India as a teacher trainer, then went on to work with the British Council as a teacher trainer and as a teacher also. However, when COVID happened, work slowed down. And that's what gave me an opportunity, I think, to think about what I really wanted to do. This was in my heart for a long time, but I hadn't been able to get it out and translate it into action. But when COVID gave me all the time in the world and not much to do, that's when I realized that I wanted to go back to connect with children because most of my work involved working with adults. So I still had that desire to work with children. And I also wanted to work with children because that's an age where you can teach them the values that they will grow up with. And I wanted to teach them the language to create change through lessons or through stories. So that's where it was born. I wanted to connect with children. I wanted them to learn what I call the missing curriculum, because when children go to school, they learn a lot of different subjects, but things which are really important in life. For example, talking about empathy, learning empathy rather, talking about social emotional skills, talking about how to connect with people, sensitivity, learning about the war situation, learning about refugees, and learning about disability, being inclusive in their approach. That was something I felt was missing in the school curriculum. And that's what I wanted to touch upon, dealing with loss. So most of my stories come from the situation that I'm going through. And when I realize these are topics which are not covered in school and children do not learn how to deal with these things, that's when I come out with these stories. So that's where Story Auntie was born. I started narrating stories live. Once I started going live, I thought it would be good to put it up on YouTube so that children could revisit the stories as many times as they wanted and pick up new things every time. So I think that was the birth of Story Auntie. And the name was something which I wanted children to connect with rather than Bhavna or whatever. I just wanted myself to be Story Auntie.
Every journey has its ups and downs. Could you share a personal story of some challenge you have overcome in your career?
I think my biggest challenge was that first, as I said, after a teaching stint for about 4 to 5 years, when I taught Ajay as one of my students, after that, I went on a long sabbatical because I had two children and I wanted to spend that time with them. So I think I was at home for a long time. So the biggest challenge in my career was to become get into my career once again after being a homemaker for a very long time, a homemaker, a mother, and all of that. So getting back to teaching was something which is the biggest challenge. But then once I started my second innings, I think I went from strength to strength, and first starting with a teaching job where I taught for about a few years in a school nearby, which was a part-time job. Post that, I ventured into a full-time job. From there, I ventured into teacher training. So that was English language training. And from there, I became a materials writer. And then during COVID, I think I've done a lot of different things. I've become a menstrual educator. I've become a reproduction and sexual health educator. I ran batches for girls, teaching them about menstrual education. And I ran batches for English language teaching. But the English that I wanted to cover was what I call real English, because it touched the society. So it was not just about vocabulary or grammar. It was also about empathy, learning empathy. It was also about dealing with loss. So these were the topics that came strongly through my stories. So I think that was my biggest challenge, from a homemaker to a teacher, and then my journey from there. And then the second one, I think, could be COVID, which taught me how to reinvent myself. And that's when I learned that I had the resilience to cope with different situations.
So, Learning Sutra is your brainchild. What's the most heartfelt feedback you've received that confirm that you are making a difference?
Okay, so one of them could be you inviting me for this session. So that's one feedback. So that tells me that I'm making a difference. So thank you for that. But, thinking of other feedback, I think someone just told me, a child who was listening to my story told me that I can see myself in the character that you had in your story. And a parent once told me that I've never seen stories like this or lessons like this in school. I wish they were taught in school. I wish these topics were taught in school. So I don't know if you know this, but with every story that I narrate, I also release a worksheet which children can use and use it to go through the stories. And through the worksheet, I touch upon some language aspects so that they can learn some kind of new language skills. And I also touch upon life lessons where I ask them reflective questions so that they can think about the story deeper. So that's a part of it. And one more very close feedback for me is one of my nephews who's very fond of language, if I may say so. He's just 11 years old, but he has words. He has the dictionary of Shashi Tharoor. So I call him Shashi Tharoor, in fact. He's the one who gives me feedback on my stories. So every time I have a story, I release a story. Next time we meet, okay, Masi, can I give you this feedback? And I'm really scared of him. So yeah, that's one of the most positive feedbacks, though it's scary, but it's definitely something that I hold very close to my heart.
So inclusivity is close to your heart. Can you share a touching moment from working with differently able learners?
Yes. So that's again one of the memories that is very close to my heart. So this was when I started. I hadn't started my channel yet, but I had visited some schools from the lower middle class background to narrate stories to them with the objective of teaching them language and teaching them the values that I wanted to. In the midst of all that, there was somebody who connected with me. One of my close friends asked me if I would like to visit a center where there are differently abled children and narrate a story to them. My first instinct was, why not? Yes, I would love to do that. I said yes, but once I started thinking about it, I started to panic a bit. I had some anxiety, not because of what the children are, but more because of how I could connect to the children. So I wanted to create that connection with children, but I was not sure whether I would be able to do that. So I had to really reflect and introspect into my storytelling techniques, into my language, into the way I narrate stories and everything else to make that storytelling session accessible and really memorable for those children. However, when I went to that center, I went with very shaky feet. But I have to confess that once I went there and I narrated the stories, it became one of the most memorable experiences for me. Because when I asked them questions in the middle of the story, they had answers to every single question that I asked them. Of course, it was also because I went at their pace. I went down to that level. I sat down with them. I would repeat my sentences so that they get the story. But the response that I got, the love that I received from them was something that I will never forget. So in fact, now we are in the midst of talk with that organization. Now, this was a completely voluntary thing. This is not related to any financial aspect of my storytelling. So we are now in talks to see if we can do these sessions more regularly and I can meet these children more regularly. I've gone there again, I think once again, but in all, I've just gone there twice. I want to go there more. So I'm trying to work out things where I can do it more regularly, whether it is online or whether it is face to face. So that's an experience that I will never forget. It's the most cherished storytelling session for me.
So storytelling is an art, and I believe you're an artist also. So how did this 3S framework come to life, and what does it mean to you personally?
So again, this was something which evolved as I went on creating learning, as I went on teaching English, and I realized what else is missing from school curriculums. And also, I would like to add here, you just said storytelling is an art, but I partially agree with that. I can also say storytelling is a craft which can be learned at any stage, because I never considered myself a storyteller. I'm not a storyteller in the conventional sense of the word. I'm a storyteller in the sense that I want my stories to help children think deeper about the stories. So I may not be a storyteller with a lot of storytelling gimmicks in my bag, but I still manage to make children think. So again, going back to the 3S framework that you spoke about. So generally, I teach language and I'm also a teacher trainer. So when you look into language, language is said to be made up of S's. So there are four S's, four skills, which is listening, reading, speaking, reading, and writing. These are the four essential skills that anyone needs to learn when you're learning any language. The second component of language is the four systems of language. So language is made up of grammar, vocabulary, phonology, that's for the sound of a language, and discourse. Discourse is basically communication, how to communicate with someone. That's called discourse in technical lingo. So these two were already there. But when I started narrating my stories, I want to teach real English. So what is real English about? English is basically a melting point for all subjects. In an English lesson, you can learn about history, you can learn about geography, you can learn about maths and a lot of other things. So I wanted that connection or a bridge to the society, to the real world. And that's what these stories gave me. For example, there's a story about disability, a child on a wheelchair. It's on my YouTube channel. So when you watch that story, you don't have a sense of pity for that child on a wheelchair. That's not what I aim to bring about. What I aim to bring about is the fact that children on wheelchair also lead a normal life. They are not suffering. They are not always struggling. They lead a normal life, just like you and me. So that's what I wanted to bring about through the stories. So that's how I built that connection. So when a child watches that story and sees the character in the stories on a wheelchair and is leading a happy life, in fact, he's also leading a lot of things with his sister. That's when they form that association. And once they see in real life, when they see a child on a wheelchair or a person on a wheelchair, they will not feel pity towards that person. They will feel as if that person is also a part of society. And that's the empathy that I want to bring about. So that's where the third circle came in, which I slowly, so I just called it the third component, and slowly it evolved into the third S, which I call society. So now in my lessons, there's a mental reminder. I have a mental reminder to myself to include at least one S from each of the circles. So the first circle is skills, four systems, and then we have the third circle, which is society. Now, society is an evolving circle. There is nothing fixed there. I talk about different components. Sometimes I talk about empathy there. Sometimes I talk about climate. Sometimes I talk about death. So everything that can link back to the society. So they should be able to see what they learn from the story around themselves. That's my main aim when I'm choosing a story also.
So for educators who are eager to bring stories into their classrooms, what piece of advice that comes to your mind and also from your soul?
I think one would be going back to what I said. Storytelling can be an art, it can be a craft, it can also be a science, actually. So you can learn storytelling at any stage of your life, and it doesn't have to be just one way. This is for the teachers. For children, I would say, or when you're dealing with children, I would say stories are the best way to communicate with children. But you need to be very, very, sure that you're not talking down to them. You're not talking at them. So you're not preaching. You're just weaving in what you want to teach them through the stories. So for that, it's very essential to ask them questions. But when you're asking questions, don't expect answers, especially not if you're very firm about right or wrong answers. There is no right or wrong answer if you're listening to a child. So if you have that mindset out of your brain, just give them questions which they think about. They may not answer it immediately, but questions are a reflection tool to make them think deeper about anything that you want to. So they may not give you an answer, but that thought remains in their mind. So when they interact in the real world, these stories or these questions about the stories, about the characters, about what happens in the story will come back to them. Also, another thing which I keep in mind when I'm narrating or when I'm putting out my worksheets is that every child, every learner has a very different learning style, a different learning pace, a different need. Maybe someone will learn something. One learner could learn some language aspect from my story or from the worksheet. Another learner maybe would not be interested in learning language, but maybe they would like to learn about life through my stories. So that's what I bring together, language and life lessons. So I would say use questions with children, ask them as many questions as you can. Use questions as a reflection tool, but don't expect an answer. That would be my advice.
So success isn't just numbers and feedback. Sometimes it's a quiet moment of realization. So how do you personally define success for your self-published works?
I think right now I'm, like you said, it's not about numbers. So I do not stress too much about the quantity of stories, how many stories I have. When a story comes to me, it's like a story comes to me or the idea comes to me that, okay, this is, for example, if I go back to a story on my channel, it's about dealing with loss. So I wanted to talk to children about what happens when a person dies. However, I wanted to do it in a way which is not very morbid, not very negative, because it's children. So it has to be age appropriate in that way. It's not something which I want them to sit and cry about. It's a positive message that I want. And that came because I lost my dad. I lost a very close uncle of mine who was a father figure for me. And within 3 months of that, I lost my dad. So this was something that came to my mind through that. Okay, as adults, if we struggle so much when we face loss of a loved one, imagine what a child goes through. They don't even understand. And sometimes we as adults, we forget that children also have emotions. They need to understand that. So when somebody in the family dies, I think children face the most difficult times because there's nobody to sit down and explain things to them. What has happened? Where has that person gone? How did that person die? These are questions which arise in a child's mind, but there is nobody to answer them. So maybe this is my way of telling children that it's okay when you deal with loss, it's okay to cry for some time. It's okay to not talk to people. It's okay to do things which others might find very strange. So it's your way of dealing with loss. Do it the way you want to. And that's the message I give to parents also. Talk to children about loss, not only when you lose someone, but prepare them for it. Talk about it to normalize it, to bring it into their normal life so that they know what they're going through. Because these are things everyone will face today or tomorrow, but it's not something that school teaches them. So that's my way. And that's, if I can reach out to one child and make a difference in the child, in the life of one family, I think that's success for me. That's how I define success.
Okay, so language is a bridge between culture. So in your vision, how can we build this bridge wider and stronger for everyone?
I think the first and foremost thing is, though I'm teaching English, I would say um, I don't believe in treating English as a yardstick to measure success, because sometimes we look down upon people who may not know English or who do not speak very fluent English. But I don't think that's the case. That does not make them inferior or superior. Speaking English or not speaking English doesn't affect success. The person might still be equally insightful, equally intelligent. It's not a reflection of their skills, of their talent, etc. So we have to stop this attitude of looking down upon people who do not speak English. It's all right to learn English, but it's not all right to treat English as, okay, put it on a throne and okay, English is something very superior. So even here, when you look at things, you will realize that when people from European countries or from any other country come to, when we communicate with people from any European country, they have their own accents. French people, Ukrainian people, anyone, they will have their own accents. However, when they speak with their accent, we don't look down upon them. We treat it as part of language. Then why do we look down upon people who speak with a Punjabi accent, who speak English with a Punjabi accent or a Maharashtrian accent or a Gujarati accent or any kind of Bengali accent? So why do we need to look down upon that? It's just a part of the way we speak. Language is just a tool for communication. It's not a yardstick to measure someone's talent or ability. So I think that's what can create a more inclusive world. English is definitely important, but it's important, as I say, it's more a language of communication or a lingua franca rather than a language to be treated as royalty. So it's more the practical use of English than anything else.
So what is life according to you?
What is life? Now, that's a very difficult question, Ajay. I would say life for me is emotions. In one word, it's just emotions. So the emotions that you go through every day, the joy, the happiness, the sorrow when you lose someone, the sense of disappointment when you don't get something that you want, the sense of excitement when you receive a phone call or a message or any kind of thing that you want. So it's all about emotions. So when you look at the emojis that a phone gives you, I think that's an entire map or an entire summary of life. If you look at the entire list of emotions, that's what life is all about. So you can describe life using one emoji, or you can describe your emotion using one emoji. So that's it. Life is about emotions.
So what advice would you like to give to your younger self?
I would say just be you. If I would tell myself, there's only one Bhavna or there's only one Story Auntie. So just be you. There is no one like you, and there should be no one that you try to become. So don't be afraid of being you. And also don't be afraid of making mistakes. Don't be afraid of changing fields. So for me, I changed fields very drastically, though they were interconnected in some way. But there was a big change when I went from teaching in schools to teaching English as to adults and to children in the world of English language training. So it was somewhat a shift of careers for me. And that was quite a turning point. So don't be afraid of taking, and that's what I like about this generation. I like my children also are they've finished their studies now and they're doing part-time jobs, full-time jobs, things like that. But I always tell them, okay, if you want to change over to something else, try it so that you have no regrets later.
Yeah.
Try it. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, then there are more options. So don't be afraid of changing fields and just be you. Don't ever feel that you have to be perfect. Though that's one thing that I sometimes have.
Yeah.
It's my weakness. When I put out stories, I want the stories to be perfect. But that's something that I'm learning to let go. It's more important to be out there rather than to be perfect.
So is
That's
there
it.
anything else you would like to share with our audience?
I think that's about it. Just let your children be what they want to be. Let them make their own mistakes. Let them think. Let them reflect on things. Let them ask you questions. You ask them questions. So just have a talk with your children about anything that you face. Sometimes we underestimate children. We feel children might not know about things. But sometimes the perspective that children bring to different things is not something that we would expect. We can be tied down with problems for ages. But if a child says, okay, can I help you solve a problem? Do not dismiss the child by saying, okay, no, you're too young. Listen him, hear him out. See what the child wants to say. Maybe they'll come up with a solution which you never thought about. So I think that's perspective. That's the innocent perspective of a child. They simplify things in ways that we cannot.
So how can our viewers follow your work and stay connected with you?
The best way is through my YouTube channel. My YouTube channel is called Storyland by Learning Sutra. Look up YouTube. There are some excellent stories there. So if you want to use them with your child, you can sit down with your child while their child is listening to the story, or you can even let them watch it alone. And I can guarantee you that they will learn some language or life lesson through each story that they view. So one is, of course, the YouTube channel. I have a website, which is again called Learning Sutra Lifelong Learning. I call it that because I consider myself a lifelong learner. I like to learn things. I like to take on new challenges. I like to keep evolving and growing as a professional, as a person also. So that's another way they can connect with me. I may not be very active there. Maybe they will not be able to get in touch. But social media also, I have an active presence on Twitter, on Instagram. I have an Instagram page for Learning Sutra, so you can you can connect there with me. I have a personal Instagram page. I'm also on Facebook, LinkedIn. So I'm there. I have a presence everywhere, though I may or may not be active at different times, depending on the phases that I'm going through in my life.
Yeah.
But I definitely respond to messages on social media quite promptly. So feel free to get in touch with me.
Right, madam. I'm very grateful to you for sharing all this wonderful information with us. So on this note, thank you so much, madam, and thank you everybody for watching this video. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Ajay. Thank you again for reconnecting. It's a pleasure to connect with students who I've taught earlier and know that I'm creating a difference somewhere to someone's life.
Yeah, back then I used to be scared of you, but not now.
I hope not. I hope not. Yeah, when I was teaching, most of my students were very scared of me, but let me make this a public declaration that I'm not as scary as I was then.
Yeah, can tell.
I've loosened up. I've learned how to let my hair down, and I've learned how to enjoy with children.
All right, madam. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.